You don't just move on after 30 years. It's been 5 years since I found out. 5 years since everything I thought I knew about love, about loyalty, about her, fell apart like rotten wood. And still, I wake up some mornings with a weight on my chest I can't explain. I look over at the empty side of the bed, and for a second, I forget that she's not just at the store or in the kitchen making coffee. She's gone. But it's not the kind of gone that happens when someone dies. It's the kind of gone where the body remains, but the soul leaves. And the damage stays. Her name is Marlene. We were married for 32 years. We met in college, both of us too broke to afford our own places. So we ended up in a group house with 5 other people. She was studying early childhood education. I was working part-time at a tire shop, dreaming about owning my own auto business one day. She used to bring me sandwiches while I changed oil in the dead of winter. That's the kind of woman she was. Warm, attentive, funny in a dry, biting way. The kind of woman who made you feel like the world made sense just because she was in it. We built a quiet life in Omaha. Had 2 daughters, bought a small house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I eventually opened a garage. She taught preschool. We made it work. There were tough years, like when her father passed or when my shop nearly went under during the 2008 crash. But we stuck together. At least I thought we did. Then came Gerald Sloan. I didn't even know the man until all of this. Turns out he was the regional director at the corporate office where Walter, my best friend since high school, worked. Gerald was his boss. Marlene met him at some community outreach function through Walter. She told me he was charismatic and funny in an old-school way. I didn't think anything of it. She always talked to people. She liked conversation, interaction. She wasn't one of those cold, distant types. I trusted her. God, I trusted her. It started with her dressing up more, then staying out later, always helping with school projects, or grabbing coffee with the PTA moms. Then came the weekends where she wanted space to visit her sister across town, even though her sister later told me she hadn't seen Marlene in months. I didn't catch on. Or maybe I did, and just didn't want to believe it. The truth came from Walter. I remember the day. He came over on a Saturday afternoon, holding 2 beers and shaking like he just watched someone get hit by a truck. "Henry, I need to tell you something." I thought maybe he'd lost his job. Maybe his kid got arrested. Something bad, but not that bad. Then he said Gerald's name. I froze. He told me he had overheard a conversation in the office. Gerald bragging about his little secret in Omaha. Said her name once, not loudly, but enough for Walter to recognize it. Marlene. He didn't want to believe it either. He tried to dismiss it, thought maybe it was a coincidence. But curiosity got the better of him, and he started paying attention. Late-night calls, private meetings, travel logs, company car mileage that didn't line up. Gerald had been making special detours to Omaha under fake inspection visits. That's when Walter saw them, in a parking garage. Her hand on Gerald's chest, him brushing her hair back behind her ear. And then the kiss. He didn't want to tell me. It took him weeks to build the nerve. But he said he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he let me keep living in the dark. I wish he had. I wish he'd just let me be ignorant. Because what followed was worse than any lie. It was the unraveling of a life. I confronted Marlene that night. She denied it, of course. Said Walter was confused, said it must have been someone else. But her face turned pale the moment I said his name. Her face went cold. But her face turned pale the moment I said Gerald Sloan. That's how I knew. She could talk circles around any question. She always had a gift for words, for redirecting conversations. But her face always gave her away. She went still. Not angry, not defensive. Just quiet like a dog that knows it's about to be punished. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there waiting. She sat down. She didn't ask how I knew. Didn't say his name again. She just whispered, "Henry, I never meant for it to go that far." As if that made it better. As far as what? I asked. Kissing him in a parking garage, or letting him into our lives without me even knowing? She started crying, quiet, gasping sobs. The kind that used to move me, back when I believed they came from guilt instead of fear of getting caught. "It just happened," she said. "No," I told her. "It never just happens." She didn't deny it after that. And in some ways, I wish she had. I wish she'd held on to the lie just a little longer so I could keep holding on to the version of her I still loved. But that woman was already gone. Over the next few weeks, I lived in a haze. I went to work. I came home. I slept on the couch, even though she offered to move into the guest room. I couldn't stand to hear her brush her teeth in our bathroom, like nothing had changed. I couldn't stand the sound of her humming while cooking. I couldn't stand that the world kept turning like it hadn't just collapsed. The girls were grown by then, both in college, and we decided not to tell them right away. I didn't want them hating their mother. I didn't want them taking sides. I didn't even know what side I was on yet. Walter stopped coming around. I could see it on his face the last time we spoke. He blamed himself. Said maybe if he hadn't told me, we could have all kept going. But he was wrong. Marlene said it had been emotional at first, that she didn't sleep with Gerald until months after their first meeting, that it started with talking, long, meaningful conversations where she felt seen again. I said nothing to that, because if after 30 years she didn't feel seen, I didn't know what else I could have done. I worked hard, I provided, I listened when she cried about her mother's decline, about work stress, about the empty nest. Was it exciting? Number. But it was real. We were real, and now we weren't. Eventually, she told me she ended things with Gerald. He was never going to leave his wife, she said. Like that was some kind of moral victory. We tried marriage counseling. I went because I didn't want to make a decision in anger. I wanted to believe it could be fixed. That maybe this was a storm we could survive. But every time I looked at her, I saw him. Every time she touched my arm, I wondered how many times she touched his the same way. The therapist said trust could be rebuilt. But no one explained how to rebuild love that had been hollowed out from the inside. One night, a few months in, I came home and she had dinner ready. Candles lit, soft music playing. She tried to kiss me. I flinched. That was the moment I knew. The moment I realized I didn't hate her. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't love her. And I didn't want to pretend I could find that feeling again just because it made the story cleaner. I moved into a small apartment on the west side of Omaha the next day. Packed a bag while she sat silently on the bed, watching. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just nodded. She knew too. The hardest part was pretending I was okay. The new apartment was small, clean but lifeless. A bed, a chair, a microwave that sounded like it was trying too hard. It smelled like fresh paint and someone else's past. But it was mine. And yet, every night, I sat on the edge of that unfamiliar bed and stared at the wall. Not crying, not angry, just blank. That was the worst part. Not the pain, the numbness. Friends tried to check in. My daughters called more often. I told everyone I was fine. Just needed space. Trying to figure things out. They didn't know. I kept the truth to myself for 6 months. Not because I was protecting Marlene, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd spent 30 years building something that could be torn apart so quickly. Ashamed that I didn't see it coming. Ashamed that even after all of it, I still missed her sometimes. The morning routine was the hardest to let go of. No more shared coffee. No more standing in the hallway tying my tie while she gave last-minute advice about the weather. No more her. One morning, I pulled into the gas station and saw her car. She didn't see me. She was laughing with someone, a co-worker maybe, or a friend. But she looked light, unburdened, like someone who had already moved on. And that crushed me. Not because I wanted her back, but because I hadn't moved at all. I'd left the house, left the marriage, but inside I was still frozen in that moment. Walter said her name. I finally told my daughters the truth. We sat at a diner, and I laid it out calmly, factually. No drama, no blame, just the truth. They cried. Both of them. Not because we were separating, but because they'd always seen us as the gold standard. If Mom and Dad couldn't make it, one of them said, "What's the point?" I had no answer. After that, they stopped asking if we'd get back together. Marlene and I stayed civil. We split everything evenly. No court battles, no lawyers, just signatures and silence. I think that hurt more than if we'd screamed. 5 months after the divorce was final, I saw Walter again. We got lunch. It was awkward at first, but eventually the wall between us fell away, and we talked like we used to. About work, the Huskers, aging knees, and broken appliances. Then he asked me the question no one else had dared to ask. Do you ever think you'll forgive her? I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to say no, wanted to hold on to the righteous anger, the moral clarity, but the other part, the part that had once loved her so deeply, whispered something else. I don't know, I said. Maybe. But not yet. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a path you crawl, and I was still face down in the mud. I couldn't hate her, but I couldn't miss her either. There came a point, maybe a year after I moved out, where I stopped expecting to wake up angry. The fury had burned through its fuel, and all that was left was cold ash. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel love. I just felt nothing. At first, I thought that was healing. But healing isn't numbness. Healing is feeling the pain and learning to live despite it. I tried dating again. Everyone told me I should. My daughters encouraged it, gently. Walter offered to set me up with a friend of his sister's. So I went. I said yes. I sat through dinners and walks and awkward coffees. The women were kind, some even funny. But it all felt like a school play, like I was playing a part I didn't remember auditioning for. Once, a woman touched my hand across the table, and I flinched, not because I didn't want to be touched, but because it didn't mean anything. It wasn't her fault. It was mine. My emotional wires were cut. Nothing connected anymore. I went back to therapy, not couples therapy, just me. And for the first time, I said it out loud. She didn't ruin me, but she changed me. My therapist nodded. Of course she did. So now you have to decide what kind of man you want to be in the aftermath. That word stuck with me. Aftermath. because that's what my life had become. A quiet, slow-motion disaster recovery. I stayed busy, fixed up old cars, volunteered at a trade school, mowed my lawn like it mattered. I stopped talking about Marlene, not out of spite, just because she wasn't part of the story anymore. At least, not the way she used to be. Then, one afternoon, I ran into her at the grocery store. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years. She looked older, tired, not broken, just weathered, like someone who'd been through her own war and was still trying to find a place to lay her weapons down. We made small talk. She asked about the girls. I asked about her new job. She didn't mention dating. Neither did I. And then, as I turned to go, she touched my arm. "Henry," she said, "I never stopped regretting it." I looked her in the eyes. "I know," I said. That was all. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. Sometimes that's all two people can give each other when the damage is permanent. I didn't hate her, but I didn't miss her either. And that somehow felt like progress. Some things don't heal, but you learn to carry them. A few months after that grocery store encounter, I took a trip out west. It wasn't a big, dramatic, soul-searching pilgrimage or anything like that. I just needed to get out. Away from the same streets, the same intersections, the same gas stations where I'd catch flashes of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I drove through Colorado, into Utah. Ended up in a tiny town outside Moab where nobody knew my name. I stayed at a cheap motel that smelled like dust and memories, drank terrible coffee, and watched the sky catch fire every evening as the sun went down behind Red Rock. And I breathed. Really breathed. It was the first time in years that my body didn't feel like a clenched fist. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my grief like a brick under my coat. One night, I sat outside with a notebook, the kind I used to scribble in when I was young. I started writing a letter to myself, not to Marlene, not to the man I used to be, just to me. "Now, you survived," I wrote. "You're still standing, and even if the wound never fully closed, you're still here." I don't know why that hit me so hard, but I cried. Not the choking, angry tears from before, but soft ones, like something old and heavy was finally melting. When I got back to Omaha, things weren't different. The streets were the same. My apartment still smelled like sawdust and cheap detergent. But I was different. I started sleeping better, eating better. I even smiled when my oldest daughter told me she was engaged. Not that fake, tight-lipped smile I'd mastered, but a real one. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I still think about Marlene sometimes, not often. But when I do, it doesn't hurt the way it used to. She was a chapter, a long one, maybe even the best written one. But the book didn't end there. I haven't dated since those awkward early attempts, but I've stopped avoiding the idea. I started going to community cookouts again, started saying yes to things, even small ones. A beer with Walter, a trip to the farmer's market, a conversation with the woman who teaches ceramics at the community center. Her name's Dana. She has kind eyes, lost her husband a few years back. We talk about loss sometimes, not in a heavy way, more like people comparing scars. There's something comforting about being around someone who doesn't expect you to be whole. Because some things don't heal, but you learn to carry them better. And sometimes, when you're lucky, someone walks beside you who helps shoulder the weight without trying to erase it. I'm still here, and that's enough. Dana and I never labeled it. Not dating, not friends, not anything that fit neatly into a category. We met for coffee, sometimes for lunch. Once she came to my place and helped me hang shelves I'd been avoiding for months. She brought a level and everything. "I like things to be straight," she said, then smirked. "In life too, but we can't always get that." She made me laugh, and that more than anything felt like proof that life wasn't done with me yet. We didn't talk about Marlene much. I mentioned her once in passing. Donna just nodded. She didn't dig. She didn't offer advice. She just listened, like someone who knew what it meant to lose something you thought was permanent. One afternoon, we walked past a couple in their 70s, sitting on a bench, holding hands. I felt that familiar twist in my gut, the one that used to be grief, then turned to resentment, and now felt more like quiet acceptance. "They probably have their own scars," Dana said softly. And I realized something. Every love has cracks. Some get sealed, some split wider, and some, they stay open forever. But that doesn't mean you stop walking. It's been 5 years since the affair, 3 years since the divorce, 1 year since I started breathing again. And today? Today, I'm okay. Not great, not broken, just okay. And that's more than I ever thought I'd be when I sat in that empty apartment staring at the wall. I still miss the idea of what we had. But I don't miss her. I don't miss pretending. The thing about heartbreak is that it teaches you what matters, what's real, what you can survive. So if you've been there, if you've been gutted by the one person who was never supposed to hurt you, I hope this story reminds you. You're not weak. You're not naive. You're just human. And some of us learn the hardest lessons late. But we learn. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel even a little less alone, maybe give it a like. Maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, subscribe. Some of us aren't here to start over. We're here to continue. And I'm still here. And that's enough.